Quite the shock in the NFL world as Cleveland Browns edge rusher and superstar Myles Garrett requested a trade from the Cleveland Browns organization. And on today's show, we are going to explore if the Miami Dolphins could be one of those teams that ultimately tries to acquire Myles Garrett. I am Nic Rohloff. This is Dolphins Today by Chat Sports. And Ian Rappaport broke the news with a statement given from Myles Garrett on an early Monday morning that Garrett is wanting out of the Cleveland Browns organization. And what he said specifically was very intriguing to me. While I have loved calling this city my home, my desire to win and compete on the biggest stages won't allow me to be complacent. The goal was never to go from Cleveland to Canton. It's always been to compete for and win a Super Bowl. With that in mind, I have requested to be traded from the Cleveland Browns. NFL had to take the headlines after an intriguing weekend in the NBA, but either way, this actually isn't the most surprising thing in the world. Garrett has hinted over the last 2 or 3 months that he wants to know the direction that the Browns franchise and organization is going in because he wants to start competing for Super Bowls. He was drafted first overall by Cleveland, got off to a rough start, and not him personally, but the organization, then had a couple good seasons with Baker Mayfield, made the playoffs with Kevin Stefanski, and then they've kind of went back downhill after making the trade for Deshaun Watson, and they seem stuck to be in purgatory and in that bottom tier of the NFL for the next 2 to 3 years, as they do have the number 2 pick in the NFL draft this year. So I understand why Garrett may want to request a trade from Cleveland. But what say you? Before we start to break it down on what it would cost, how he would impact Miami, should the Dolphins entertain a Myles Garrett trade? It's today's pinned comment, so go scroll down and answer it in the comment section. Type Y for yes or type N for no. I do think it's unlikely that Miami ultimately pursues Myles Garrett. Not the most impossible thing in the world, but let's talk about what a trade would look like and the details coming into Miami. Myles Garrett is still 29 years old. He turns 30 in December, so he'd basically play the entire next season at 29 years old. He is under contract for 2 more seasons in 2025 and 2026 at a relatively good cost. Right now, the cap hit, while being on the Cleveland Browns, is only $19.7 million and $20.3 million in respect to the Browns organization. Now, he would be seeking a contract projection, and the projection is a 4-year, $137 million deal, which is $34.25 million in annual average salary. And there is more on the financials that I wanted to show. Shout out to Spotrac for sending out this tweet. They were the ones who projected that 4-year contract for Myles Garrett, but the Browns would be hit with $36 million in dead cap if they made this trade this offseason, and the new team that acquired Garrett would get him for the next 2 years, non-guaranteed, which obviously you're not trading for Garrett to not pay him that money, but it would ultimately be $19.8 million this year, and then it actually would jump up to $25 million in 2026. And even though you would have to give Myles Garrett that 4-year extension, which would take him now to age 35, because the extension would then run 32, 33, 34, 35-year season, it's a favorable contract that you'd be acquiring over the next 2 seasons based on the player. I mean, paying Myles Garrett $19.8 and $25 million over the next 2 seasons, that is basically stealing. Bradley Chubb's cap hit is $29 million for this upcoming season, and at this point, he isn't even half the player that Myles Garrett is. We're talking about a top 3 defensive player in the league that has had no less than 14 sacks individually over the last 4 seasons, combining, by the way, for 32 plus 28, that's 60 sacks over the last 4 seasons. This is a top 3 defensive player in the league without a question, in my opinion. It's really him, TJ Watt, Nick Bosa, and Micah Parsons in that range of edge rushers. Then you start to bring in linebackers like Fred Warner's and cornerbacks. But this is a ridiculously good player that still has a lot of good football left in him. And him coming to Miami would form one of the most exciting edge rushing duos in all of football, and potentially trios. And we'll explain what that is in just a second. But we're also going to explain what a trade may look like from a different NFL team or the Miami Dolphins, so stay tuned for that. But make sure you are subscribed to the channel because we'll have the latest trade rumors, NFL draft rumors, free agency rumors surrounding the Miami Dolphins on the road to 68K subscribers. Join the channel, hit that sub button because we'll break down everything surrounding Miami. And the reason why I thought that maybe there is a chance that Miami goes out and trade for Myles Garrett is, well, the odds makers actually put their odds 10th best, tied with the New England Patriots as the 10th most likely landing spot for Myles Garrett. And I do think it's unlikely that Miami acquires him due to what they already have in the edge room. They already have 4 guys under contract. It's actually maybe the most filled position on the roster as of right now. And you might see turnover based off Bradley Chubb's contract, but Chop, Jalen Phillips, Chubb, and Mo Kamara all being here for this upcoming season is very, very interesting. And after the emergence of Chop Robinson in his rookie season, it gets you giddy about the future of him and this edge group. And there is a reason and kind of possibility that Miami ultimately may want to pair Chop and Myles Garrett up together. We'll talk about maybe Chris Grier's master plan in just a second. But I do got to give some love to Game Time, the sponsor on today's show. Game Time makes buying tickets so easy, whether you want to go to a comedy show, concert, live sporting event in your local area. One of their great features is Game Time Picks. It filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats. So you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets to find the best value. It kind of makes a curation of the best value tickets. You can also put in all-in pricing. That feature shows you the total price of your ticket up front with no surprise fees at checkout. It's also the lowest price guarantee. If you find a ticket on a different service in the same exact seat, same exact section, row at that event, Game Time will actually credit you 110% of the difference. It is the most user-friendly ticket app on the market. Join me and the people here at Chat Sports because when I buy tickets, I use Game Time all the time. Download the app, create an account, and use code CHATSPORTS for $20 off your first purchase. One more time, terms apply, first purchase only, but use code CHATSPORTS to get $20 off. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Well, the reason why I'm a little bit intrigued about acquiring Myles Garrett is because Bradley Chubb's contract is one that Miami is likely either going to have to restructure or just flat out cut him. And I think this is why I'm intrigued, because if you ultimately did cut Bradley Chubb and designated it for post-June 1st or made a post-June 1st trade with Bradley Chubb, that would save you $19.5 million in 2025. Now, that could be a cut. That can be a trade. And the reason why that's so fascinating to me is because if you just flash back 2 or 3 minutes, Myles Garrett's contract for 2025 would be $19.8 million. So you could technically just swap Chubb and then obviously draft capital that you'd have to make the trade for Garrett for, and it would work on your roster, and you'd have an unbelievable pass rushing trio of Chop Robinson, Myles Garrett, and Jalen Phillips. So cutting Chubb could give you the money necessary to get Myles Garrett on your roster. You let Jalen Phillips walk after this year. Yes, you would have him this season because he's under his 5th-year player option, but you have to make the decision if you're going to franchise tag him after this year or extend him. He's got to prove to be able to stay healthy, or you can just let him walk. You can have Phillips, Garrett, and Chop this year, and then if you don't want to keep Jalen Phillips around, you can let him walk, have the $13 million come off the book, which is his player option, and then you have the Myles Garrett, Chop Robinson edge duo for the next 4 or 5 seasons after you extend Myles Garrett. That could be a pretty solid plan if you just swap Chubb for Myles Garrett. And as we mentioned earlier about him being maybe the most productive edge rusher in the entire NFL, how about the advanced numbers? Since 2022, so that's 3 seasons, he is the number 1 graded defensive player on PFF. He has the most sacks, and he has the best pass rush win rate in the NFL at 24.4%. And by the way, if you've watched our content over the last 2.5, 3 months, you would know from weeks 11 to week 18 this past year, Chop Robinson was top 5 in pass rush win rate. So you would have maybe 2 of the best edge rushers in the NFL and just straight up beating their man one-on-one right away. You know how much pressure that would alleviate from your secondary, from your linebackers, knowing that Myles Garrett and Chop Robinson are getting after the quarterback on 3rd and 5, 3rd and 6, late in the fourth quarter. Your pass rush, which was 27th, bottom 5 in the NFL this past season in sacks per game, in sack percentage, it would be fixed immediately if you acquired Myles Garrett because of what he would provide you from the outside in opposition of Chop Robinson. Letting those two go one-on-one with Zach Sealer on the inside, yeah, hello, that would be quite the defensive line and front because Garrett can also play the run game. Don't get it twisted there. But the question is, what would it cost for Miami to acquire Myles Garrett in a trade? We talked about the financial aspect. It is doable for the Dolphins to make it work financially, but the draft capital is where it gets a little dicey. One NFL GM hit up Diana Rossini and said probably a first plus. People might speculate 3 first-round picks. That's not going to happen, but maybe 1 first-round pick and a second-round pick. Maybe a first-round pick and 2 third-round picks. Maybe a player gets involved as well. Heck, maybe the Dolphins ultimately trade, if they wanted to go in this direction, Jalen Phillips and a first-round pick to get Myles Garrett as well, and they just kind of cut bait from Jalen Phillips earlier than letting him play out this 5th-year option. It's a very high price tag, which is why I have to know your thoughts on the matter. Would you trade 2 first-round picks, if that's what it required, in 25 and 26, for Myles Garrett? Type T for trade or type P for pass? Even though I think it would be an unbelievable duo of Chop and Garrett, an unbelievable pass rush when you include Zach Sealer, I am ultimately going to pass on a Myles Garrett trade. Myles Garrett would be a lot of fun, but the Dolphins need to upgrade their roster. They need to upgrade their interior offensive line. They need to overhaul their safety room. They need to find an off-ball linebacker too and address some backup quarterback issues as well as find a potential long-term answer behind Tyreek Hill when he is ultimately gone in 2 to 3 seasons. Plus, if you made a trade that included 2 first-round picks, or at least any first-round pick in 2026, forget 2025, you're basically locked into Tua for the next 4 seasons. And I would want flexibility for 2026 when it comes to the draft. If you can sell me on Jalen Phillips in the 2025 13th overall pick and maybe a 5th rounder too, sure, I can start to look into that. But if the Browns want a 2026 first rounder, which they will want, by the way, because they have the number 2 pick in the draft, they'll probably draft Abdul Carter from Penn State, assuming the Titans go quarterback at 1 at that number 2 pick, which means they are pushing back their quarterback need for another year behind Deshaun Watson. And that's why they want a 2026 first, because you've got a lot of potentially good quarterbacks coming out. You look at that class, Nico from Tennessee. You've got Carson Beck coming back. Maybe he elevates. You've got Arch Manning there as well. Drew Aller. The quarterback class in 2026 is valued pretty highly right now, which is why I want flexibility. Because if Tua Tagovailoa struggles in 2025 in production or just on health-wise again, and the Dolphins miss the postseason again, then it's time to really start planning to replace Tua, and you're probably planning to also replace Mike McDaniel and Chris Grier in this front office. So I want to keep 2026 flexibility in the NFL draft to potentially draft the QB or trade up to draft the quarterback as well, which is why if it requires a 2026 first-round pick to get Myles Garrett, I am out. I am passing, even though it would be a lot of fun. I would keep the flexibility. And that will do it for today's episode. Make sure you are subscribed to the channel because we're putting out content on the daily, 2 videos almost every single day, as well as a live show on Tuesday afternoon. So hit that sub button and join us for all the content this offseason.